What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? It's crossover time with Javier of Locked On Padres to discuss what our teams need to do to contend with the evil Empire LA Dodgers and new rules we want to see instead of the golden at bat.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, without further ado, to discuss the offseason and new rule changes that we want to see in Major League Baseball, we're bringing on Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Javi, how are you today, sir?
I am doing pretty okay, man. You know, staying in there, staying thriving and vibing. Just kind of waiting for these dominoes to fall, man. I mean, I know we've had some and we're going to talk about that today, but like, I don't know about you. It's just, gosh, maybe this should be part of our next segment and it's not a rule, but I really like how like the NBA and NFL, when free agency opens, it like happens. You know what I mean? Like we have it happen. And it's like, oh, well, the because negotiations and people try. Yeah, but these guys still end up going for crazy money anyway, which is what drives me insane. It's like, can we just cut to the chase? It would be really fun if I knew like a set time or at least even set 2-week period when it would get really fun. I know we have the winter meetings, but I think we've seen over the past decade or so that like it doesn't all happen there. And sometimes in the case of, say, my team star player, Manny Machado, you might be waiting until like February for this stuff to finish, which is crazy. But you know what, man? Even if I complain about baseball, I am never going to complain about talking to you about baseball.
Wow.
So
Thank you.
happy to be here.
Wow, my heart is warm now. I don't know why no one's ever been able to clearly explain to me like why it does take so long in Major League Baseball as opposed to other sports for like free agency and like deals and transactions. Because like we still know there's tampering. We still know these players.
Yeah, right.
Other like players on other teams and the agents are working backdoor deals. So like, why does it take Machado months and it takes Jordan Montgomery till the day before the regular season to sign with someone? Like you see in baseball, you see in football, like as soon as free agency starts, we see so many deals, so many transactions, but baseball is the only one where it's like, yeah, we had the one big Blake Snell deal, but outside of that, I mean, it's just a little tricklings here and there, but it's like most of free agency still hasn't gone underway yet.
And it's really frustrating because if you remember before the lockout, do you remember before the lockout when we got literally like 2 signings a day and it was awesome? Like that kind of showed like this could be expedited and more immediate and more reactive and more fun, frankly, like if it wanted to be. My first thing is just, owners are cheap. And then also maybe Scott Boras, he tries to get the most out of teams, but this has always been the case. So I just feel like the lockout shows you like it could be a better world is possible, guys. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise. But I don't know, man.
And
it's
as
really
a kid, I felt like free agency was fun for Major League Baseball, especially like winter meetings. Like it actually used to be like kind of appointment television on my phone where it's like, oh my God, literally at any point we might see Albert Pujols and Josh Hamilton and CJ Wilson all signed with the LA Angels. And it's like, I don't know. Since then, it feels like winter meetings, we're told that's when all the news, all the big free agency is going to happen. Then like the last, 6-7 years, it just comes and goes. And it's like maybe one cool signing. And then outside of that, it's really just guys sitting on their hands come winter meetings. So pretty weird to see. And kind of looking at the market this year, Javi, one kind of interesting trend so far. It seems like MLB free agent pitchers are starting to get paid in the year of 2024, 2025. And I don't know if this is a trend that's going to continue because I feel like over the last few years, there's been a lot of data and a lot of sample sizes that show you don't want to pay pitchers over the age of 30, long-term deals. And maybe we're moving away from long-term deals when you see the Frankie Montas and the Kikuchi deal. But I thought in terms of average annual salary, kind of a lot for those guys. Of course, Blake Snell's getting, $30+ million a year, but he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. He's a little bit more justifiable. But guys like Kikuchi, 21, Boyd getting like 14 and a half. Like, what do you think about like the rise of salaries for like these free agent pitchers? Does it worry you at all?
I don't know. I think that It's tough because I just think that teams, there's just such a premium, and you can never have too many starting pitchers. I mean, we're talking about the Dodgers. I mean, they just made that big splash of Blake Snell. Everybody could go check out my videos and my thoughts on that, but and Millard's as well from last week. But I think one of the things about this is, look at the Dodgers. What did they do last year? They traded for Tyler Glass. Now they signed Shohei Ohtani. I know they knew he wasn't pitching, but they had Walker Buehler coming back, and they signed Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And then come playoff time, like there was a real question over their starting pitching depth to the point where they had multiple bullpen games. Like I just think that even if they're struggling with it, it just shows you that having pitchers who just pitch, even if it's to like you're not a top 40 starter in the sense that you're not putting up a Lee Kershaw in his prime numbers or whatever, even if you have a high ERA, there's so much value in just getting like 150 innings or 160 innings out of a guy, even if it's like a low 4 ERA. You know what I'm saying? Like that's Padres last year with Dylan Cease. You kind of saw like, yes, he was up and down and whatnot, and he hasn't always been super on point and putting up Cy Young numbers. But the bottom line is since 2021, he's pitched at least 160 innings every single year. Like that's just crazy, crazy valuable. And I think that teams, with the Tommy John surgery epidemic, with young pitchers especially, like, with the increase in velocity, I think that's part of it. I think that pitchers are getting hurt more than I think they might have in the past. And as a result, it used to be kind of common to be able to just be like, yeah, I'm going to pitch 150 innings and we'll have a closer and then call it a day. But now you rely so much on bullpen, and bullpen, I think we see that that's a really volatile position. So yeah, you'd like to have elite relievers, but it's possible to just have a guy who has a great year every now and then, like random players who will just do well out of the bullpen and not necessarily continue that next year. You can't really find guys consistently just out of nowhere. You can't just be like, hey, let's just hope insert blank pitcher will pitch 160 innings. That doesn't really happen. So I just think that there's such a premium on it, and it's worth going after some of these guys. And obviously the high end guys going for more. Blake Snell, 5 years, 186, I believe is what it was. I think that's what you're seeing. And, Padres and D-backs, they got to see if they can bounce back, because I know the Dodgers are probably not done, and consider that they're going to have Snell, they're going to have Glass now. Bobby Miller is an interesting, high level prospect. We'll see if he bounces back this year. If they might re-sign Walker Buehler. They're going to have Ohtani. Like it's going to be a lot to compete against, but that's my dissertation, I guess.
Your thesis.
Sorry.
Yeah, for me, I guess the question is just more like, are we going to see those salaries uptick across the board? Because I think my standpoint is like, I feel like there's just a lot of teams that are willing, and it's more like the mediocre teams too, but they're willing to throw bags at like these like second, third, fourth tier pitchers instead of like, you could go out there and probably get the same guy, but better at the same salary. Like I'm looking at Frankie at 17. I'm looking at Kikuchi at 21, but like Luis Castillo is $21 million, right? Chris Bassett's 21. Framber Valdez is 18.8. So I'm like, are we going to see those guys next time they hit free agency, get something that's more commemorative to, where they are in terms of like the inflation? Or it's like, are these mid-tier pitchers just getting way overpaid by these ball clubs that are just afraid to spend maybe just 2 or 3 million more on like the elite guy? Instead, they're like, let's just go 90% off and get the guy that's a little bit lesser. But I don't know if that's actually the right strategy. I feel like teams like the Chicago Cubs, we see them go after like the Jameson Tyones and like some of these other mid-tier guys, the Cleveland Guardians. But it's like maybe just spend $3 to $4 million more and just go get the tier 1 stud instead of these tier 3 pitchers. So that's like more of like the perspective I guess I'm coming from. Why overpay for the mid-tier guy? Just pay a little bit more and get the best guy. Right?
It's possible, man. But hey, maybe teams know something, and I think that maybe they're just having trouble. Maybe it's just the makeup of baseball. Less pitchers going around versus batters. I don't know. Maybe that's just how it's going. But I'm excited to see, because what's really fun is there's still a lot of pitchers left, man. In general, this free agency class, really think is crazy.
I mean, yeah, everyone's kind of left. I mean, no one's really gotten signed.
It's like, Blake Snell's gone, but dude, I mean, just off the top of my head, you still got Max Fried, and now I'm no longer off the top of my head. You've got even someone like Kyle Gibson can give teams some value. Nate Eovaldi, Corbin Burns obviously being the big one. Scherzer and Verlander are out there. I don't know if they're like great anymore, but they're at least interesting. What's his face? Shane Bieber. You know what I mean? That's a low-end type of guy that you could go for. Luis Severino's still out there, and Frankie Montas. Guy got paid a lot of money. I know it's just for 2 years, but maybe that's the going rate is we're seeing like at least like right there or 20 million average annual value is what it seems like starting pitchers are going for now.
Well, we'll see if that continues with some of these other pitchers that are alive. Like, I'm very curious to see how much Corbin Burns is going to get on the open market. So we'll see as those deals come in. Maybe it's all being held up by Juan Soto. Would actually like to get a Juan Soto prediction from you, Javi, but we'll wait for that prediction in segment number 2. But hey, if you want to place a little wager down on where you think Juan Soto's next team might be, I think the best place to do that is going to be FanDuel, because get ready to tackle the NFL action at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Whenever I see the Lakers are playing, give me a LeBron over on points, give me 80 over on rebounds, and give me that Lakers money line when that 3-leg hits. Brings a big smile to my face. If you want a big smile on your face, never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover. And we did a little tease there before the break because we were talking about free agents. And Javi, the big name right now, reported in the ballpark of $600 million. It might be the first. Once this domino falls, all the other dominoes might fall. Do you have a Juan Soto prediction real quick for the people?
I got one real quick for you. I know it's boring, but I got Yankees. And it's now, let me be very clear. It would be really funny if he went to the Mets or the Red Sox. Let me be very clear. That would be really funny. My thinking is just, and again, I understand the Hal Steinbrenner clearly does not care about baseball nearly as much as most other good owners, I should say, and certainly not as much as his father. But I just have it. It just feels like the PR of like you went to the World Series with this guy and you're going to let him walk and your team is worth how much money? What are the Yankees worth? Like $9 billion. Like, I just feel like, and you let him go across town. I really, and I think he wants to be a Yankee. I think that they might just be buffing up the price just a little bit. I know Cohen's got deep pockets, but there's still other free agents out there. It's not like this is the only one, as we just alluded to before. So I really think that it's still the Yankees. I know it's boring, but man, if it's not, New York City media, the radio calls, WFAN, for anyone who for some reason is in the Jersey area like me, is going to have some Hall of Fame level segments. Yes. Like, I'm not usually someone for the, hey, I'm going to rant and be really hyperbolic about things. That's what sports media is too much of these days, in my opinion. But I'm all in for this one. I think it would be actually really, really funny. But it's for that reason, since I feel like we are often denied fun in sports, that I think he stays with the Yankees.
I will be tuning into the Michael K show on 98.7 if Juan Soto leaves. That show will be on fire that day. I mean, it's going to be one of those things when you see the ticker come across that Soto re-signs with the Yankees, there's going to be like, oh, like, why did we ever think anything different, right? Like, there was no chance the Yankees were going to let him go to the AL East Boston Red Sox rival or the crosstown New York Mets, like you said.
That's my thinking, right? Yeah.
But if it does happen, that would be maybe the darkest day in like Yankees history since like what, like the 90s? Like
04, yeah.
04? Okay, no, you're right. That actually sounded really bad. No, 04 is definitely the last moment that they have the biggest darkest day. So yeah, so once every 20 years, then you could say as a fan base, you have one of these really, really dark days. And yeah, Juan Soto leaving for either one of those teams would be absolutely horrendous. But hopefully, he stays out the NL West, because we know that LA Dodgers are probably still sniffing around the Juan Soto market. Yeah, and if they signed him, I'm sure they will defer 90% of that salary. But, to keep up with the LA Dodgers, is there anything the Padres are looking to do? Like, what is the Padres big weakness, big hole this offseason?
Look, yeah, I mean, that's the big question right now. And I've gotten a couple DMs about this. Like, how do we compete with them? What do we do? And I think that there's a lot of different points on this, and maybe I'll extrapolate further in a future episode. But I think that when you look at the Padres offseason, Roki Sasaki is kind of like the Luke Skywalker new hope for this team, because while the Padres are very competitive for sure, I just don't think that they're in a position where they can hand out a big contract right now to a starting pitcher. And Roki Sasaki is not that, right? Like, because of the international rule, because he's still treated as an amateur, it'd be international signing money, like that pool of money that teams have. So technically he's available to everybody, and they have had, some reports that say that they're absolutely in the running. AJ Preller has alluded to him, name dropped him randomly out of nowhere at a speech last offseason, so it definitely adds up because they really do need him. And frankly, the Dodgers could just be like, hey, all right, fine, we'll just go get Max Fried, or we'll re-sign Buehler. Like, it's not the end of the world for them. Feels like they really, really need him at the Padres. The other case is, hey, Tatis is still capable of an MVP season, even if some of the rest of their offensive players decline. Say Xander Bogaerts still stays bad. If you don't get the same, type of production out of your catcher because they lost Kyle Higashioka, you just need to get in the playoffs, man. They're not unbeatable, right? That's just not how baseball works. But I think they need to make some solid additions. I think Roki Sasaki, heck, I think even if a Jock Peterson were to get brought to this team, just a decent kind of bat, because keep in mind, the Padres, they've spent the money already. Now it's about the smart, how do you find value elsewhere? So, Donovan Solano was big for them last year. They traded for Luis Arraez. Kyle Higashioka was a big bat for them, right? So can you get value? Jurickson Profar was another one, right? So I think that's what they need to do. And I just think that there's tons of free agents that can fit that, man. I really, really do. I've talked about before that I kind of like Eloy Jimenez for some reason. Yeah. Like,
he's interesting.
Look, how often does a 27-year-old former, technically still, but former like top tier prospect who has really produced before become available at 27 years old? And he's also probably not going to cost much. Was he going to cost like 1 year, $8 million? You know what I'm saying? So like
nothing.
I think that teams that are not contending actually should be aiming for him instead of teams that like, oh God, this guy doesn't care about baseball. We're screwed and we needed him to be good. Low level teams, I think, should be going for him. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be this Roki thing, I think, is really kind of the
X factor for you guys.
The X factor, big gem that the Padres, if they sign them, it feels like a nice, they took a haymaker, right on the kisser, right when it came to this Blake Snell deal, former Padre. Yeah. The Diamondbacks took a little bit of a shot there too. But if they could go like, Roki, they could throw one right back. I feel like they'd be, it's like that South Park meme. The like, I didn't hear no bell. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like signing Roki would be a really solid counter.
Musgrove's done for 2025, right?
Exactly. And that's why they really need one. Yeah. I think if they still had Musgrove, then you could be looking at a team that's like, all right, you know what, instead, can we just get one of these lower tier pitchers? Someone who's just going to fill innings for us, be okay.
Sean Manaea.
Like a Sean Manaea, I think they could go for that and feel really, really confident about it. But because you don't really know what else is going on, like Alex Cobb, I think they could do something like that. But now that you lost Musgrove, a really impactful starting pitcher, I feel like, is one of their biggest needs in order to stand up to the Dodgers in a playoff series. I don't think you can really catch them in the regular season. But in a playoff series, I think that that's going to be important.
How about the Padres' biggest X factor for next year being the guy that they paid like $300 million to, who looks like pretty disappointing right now? Like, is there any world where Xander Bogaerts has like a bounce back and is like good again? Because listen, I'm a Red Sox fan growing up. I watched Bogaerts' whole career. I love Bogey. I thought it was a travesty when he left Boston, and he has been really bad for San Diego. The D-backs ran on Bogaerts. I would have signed him. Maybe not to that long of a deal, but a pretty sizable deal as well. So, like, what's up with Bogaerts? Is there any way to salvage his tenure with San Diego? Or do you just have to kind of write that one off for the next 9 years?
Oh man, this was look. I've had plenty of moments where I've accidentally, taken shots at the D-backs and maybe hurt you a little bit. This one hurt, man. This one hurt.
I love it. I'm Team Bogey.
I talked about this on my show too. I think that there's a chance that by the end of the year, it is considered absolutely the worst contract in baseball. I know that there are other contracts with players who are technically worse, lower wins above replacement, that because at least Bogarts plays a decent second and decent short and, tends to play games at least. But it's possible because you look at how many years are left. I know that Rendon by year is worse. I know that Chris Bryant by year is worse. But you got this guy until what, 2033?
A long time.
And his hard hit rate has gone down every year. His walk rate has gone down past 2 years. Like, these are not things that tend to get better. And for a player like Bogarts, who isn't your typical guy that declines, usually you're like, oh wow, the power went, and now he's suffering. This is a guy who was known for plate discipline, a guy who didn't strike out, a guy who would, he could hit you, 25 home runs at max, but he was mostly a low 20s home run guy who just was solid, hit a bunch of doubles, and he's not doing that. He's not walking, and I'm just wondering if that wrist injury was super debilitating, and it's the type of thing that's not going to get better with age. And yeah, man, I'm extremely nervous. That's why I try not to talk about it. But it doesn't matter. Tatis is going to put up an 8-win season, and it'll make up for it. That's
what we
case.
need.
That's the case to be made.
Bounce back. He just has to be healthy. I feel like that's just Tatis's biggest issue. He just never plays more than like 120 games in this season. So you get 145, 150 game Fernando Tatis, and then I guess Man Machado. He's still good, but he does feel a little bit like, is he going?
I think his days of being MVP are done.
Okay.
But a 4.5 win season with good defense hits you 25, 30 home runs, maybe.
He's
absolutely. I think he still can be good. And I think we saw that last year, especially.
Well, who knows? Maybe Manny Machado, maybe Xander Bogaerts. Maybe that's your golden at bat for next year, Javi. Maybe that's how you get Bogaerts' confidence back. You make him your golden at bat guy for 2025. And we'll discuss that new rule and new rules we want to see in segment number 3. No ad. So for the YouTube audience, we're right back at it. So Javi, discussing the golden bat. I discussed it a little bit on my podcast yesterday. Basically, Rob Manfred wants the beer pong celeb shot where let's say you got 2 outs in the 9th inning, bases are loaded, you're down a run. Hey, Ohtani, I know you just recorded, the last out, but can you come back up and hit again? That's what Rob Manfred wants. At any point, you could call up your best player to come up for you in a crucial time in the game. Javi, what did you think about this when you heard this rule?
Okay, so first of all, I appreciate that y'all are thinking about doing different things. I always appreciate that in baseball. It's big. This is a sport that figured out in like 2011 that maybe like every other sport in the world, we should use instant replay to get things right. Congratulations to baseball on that. Like, took you a long time. Also, congratulations to baseball. Then the year 2020, you figured out, forcing pitchers who hit $120 to hit probably doesn't make sense. I think that doesn't make sense. There's no strategy. It's just they strike out at 3 pitches or they bunt. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't great. It peaked with the home run against my team. I'm blanking on his name. Bartolo Colon home run against my team. So I appreciate where their head's at. But in this particular one, it just really is frustrating that baseball, while I appreciate, and in fairness, last innovations were great. Pitch clock, I think, has really gone off really well. I personally think that the freak out about the zombie ghost runner on second base is mostly from fans that don't know how sports work and the fact that they don't realize that like it just doesn't affect the whole regular season as a whole, and it at least adds a new element. So I appreciate that. But for me, this just feels like wrong. Don't we like in sports when the unexpected players sometimes show through? Isn't there part of the process that you want to have a 1 through 9 and not just stars? I don't want to strike out Shohei Ohtani with the bases loaded and for them to be like, ha, he comes up again. Like, that just feels so, and this isn't like an anti-star thing. I'm not saying like, oh, you just don't like that the teams that spend would be rewarded. No, man, like the heart of sports is that you get a David Freese. You know what I'm saying? Like you get moments like that you get a Tommy Edman, even not like the biggest star, but had some big moments for the Dodgers in the postseason. Like that's kind of what we like, is that it's kind of unexpected. And you're like, wow, this person, Howie Kendrick, becomes the most famous player for like a couple weeks after his hit against the Dodgers, right? I think that that's fun. And it's not like we are absent of star moments in the postseason. What we're absent of is teams with stars that never make the postseason, like the Angels, right? Like Yeah, and hey, you want to do a golden at bat rule where you
Oh,
could choose from the eliminated teams? Okay. Now you're speaking my language. That's where you get into like professional wrestling, ridiculous territory. But it just feels like this is not addressing actual issues like the blackout issues, the issues with too many teams that don't care and don't invest in the team and their product to the point where you're letting them just play in a minor league ballpark for the rest of the season, right? So it just feels like there are so many other things they should be addressing. And yeah, those are my thoughts, man.
yeah. Is there anything specifically you do want to address? Because now we'll open it up to the if you have any new rules you would like to propose part of the segment. Because of course, the new at bat, I do like the idea of maybe we could do something like soccer, where we could like loan Mike Trout to a playoff team for a postseason run or something like that, just so we could finally see our man in the playoffs. Is there anything you want to get off your chest right now, Javi?
That'd be pretty sick. Like some draft pick compensation,
Something.
maybe.
Yeah,
Do
just like a
something for the.
little competitive
It
balance.
sounds crazy, but it makes more sense than being like, hey, I have to face Freddie Freeman 3 times in a row or whatever the heck, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's just come on, man. Like he had his at bat, you got him. Now let's see if the next guy can push through. Um, I don't know, man. I mean, there's so many ideas that I've seen pitched a lot. I think in general, I think this is one that should be a requirement. I think every closer should have a crazy entrance. I know
Okay,
you
I
can't
like
really
that.
legislate that, but the Edwin Diaz one, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, Mariano Rivera. We've had some great ones. Trevor Hoffman, like the Hell Spells, like there's a lot of big ones. But what do you think? Because off the top of my head, there's not like an immediate crazy rule I can think of. Um, Maybe something that makes it easier to steal bases. I kind of miss when stolen bases were a little bit more plentiful, but what do you think?
Yeah, if we're going practical, obviously with the Dodgers spending, deferral limits would be cool. Whether it's like the amount of players on your roster, or like the percentage of the contract that you could defer, but like that's more practical. If we want to be a little bit more fun, this is one that I've always said that I'm always pro. If baseball went back to this because the steroid era was the most fun in Major League Baseball. Why don't we just legalize steroids and pine tar? I want everyone at the top of their game, Hobby. What if you had Aaron Judge juiced up, muscles coming out of his neck, going against I don't know, pitcher X, Shohei Ohtani on the mound, and he also got muscles coming out of his neck, and he's got the pine tar dripping off of his face and everything. Like I would love to see. That's when baseball was at its peak. I want to see every dude hitting 80 home runs and every pitcher also throwing 150 miles an hour at the same time.
What if we legalized fighting? Like
Oh,
how hockey does it, where
I'm down.
like they kind of let them get out their anger. Then when it looks like, all right, then they step in. Instead of this like wimpy nonsense where pitchers get to throw at you,
I don't
and
like.
then like, you know what I mean? Like, no, don't get me wrong. It's the one sport where fights still kind of happen. We really don't get that in the other sports anymore, unless you're Draymond Green and the NBA mysteriously just lets you do whatever you want, even though you're strangling players on the court. Whatever. But I don't know, man. I think it'd be fun. I think let's just get like a lot of pizzazz in there. You know what I'm saying? But I do have to admit that home run derby, pitch clock, they've made some decent changes, even if they've been really late on some. I think that baseball has actually been good in that regard. But the bigger thing isn't rules. It's, salary cap, salary floor. I don't
Mm,
know which one exactly. I think floor is the bigger deal right now.
yeah, I
But
agree.
my thing is, come on, man. Like, you got to figure this out. You can't have it that the Cleveland Guardians were in the ALCS this year, and I guarantee you, Millard, the biggest move they will make is a Jock Peterson type of signing. That just doesn't. Could you imagine the Celtics, like after they lost the finals a couple years ago, that they were like, no, we're trading Jaylen Brown now? Like that's what happens in baseball all the time, and it's really frustrating. And if there was some way you could fix that, I know that it won't happen because that's not in the interest of most of the owners and especially Rob Manfred. But I think that's just I think that's the actual problem with baseball right now.
How about Javi? What if we put a little deadline in for free agency? What if we did something where it's like,
Mm,
here's a 3-week period, you have to sign these
mm.
players. This way, we're trying to bring that frenzy appeal back that we saw during the lockout. Because honestly, like you said, it was consistent. Jeff Passan, Jeff Passan, Passan,
Jeff Boston. Yeah.
Passan, yeah, bomb drops every single day on the X on the Twitter, and it's just
Dude
exciting. We
was
just
the
had
best.
content to talk about, and just like
Oh,
we just don't have that anymore.
it was just like I'm just on my couch, just like, oh, here comes another one, like I just if yeah, you're right. Like I wish we could put like a period. I imagine that like the MLBPA might have some issues with
Yeah.
that because it would, you know, f- give them less time to negotiate. Make it that you punish the team then, right? Like make it that it's like if the team doesn't sign the player by a certain time, maybe they miss the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't know what it is, but and they miss the first 2 weeks of the season, and the player will still get paid. By the way, you know what I mean. So maybe that's what you do. But I'm with you. If we could make some type of way that it's like you got 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and you better sign some of these guys. But then it becomes a thing of like, well, there's minor free agents that don't sign. Like, is that an insult to teams? You know what I mean? I don't know. Man.
Javi, extra innings. We take away the ghost runner. Instead, every inning, you take away a position player. So, like,
Yo, this would be sick. I'm not gonna lie, this would be funny.
So, like the 15th inning, you only got like 4 or 5 guys on the field for both teams.
You
And
just have to take out like the left fielder or whatever. That it gets hit to the left, and then it becomes a triple. If you do that, hey, crazy things have happened.
like bench warmers by like the 18th inning, just like 3 guys out there playing like every position. Like that's what we want to see in extra innings. That's some ghost runner.
That would be really sick. That would be really sick. Maybe you have to let's bring some more uniforms. Maybe let's get a little crazy there. Why not?
2 uniforms, double uniforms.
Yeah, double uniforms, man.
Yeah, let's layer.
Yeah, I just it would be really funny. I don't know, but I think that in general, we're in a weird spot with baseball and rules, and I just you got to fix the ownership, man. That's the biggest thing. I just don't think that they have any interest in doing that.
Yeah, the real new rule we need owners. If you don't. I guess it would be like a salary floor is what I'm about to propose.
Yeah.
If you don't spend this much money every year, you get kicked out of Major League Baseball. You should only have owners in the sport who are willing to spend. If you're not willing to spend this much every year, you get
Nick
kicked out.
Castellanos. He brought this up, I think, during the playoffs, or at least towards the end of the season, where he was like, we get demoted if we fail. What about an owner that hasn't been to the playoffs in 15 years? Maybe they should get demoted. I'm like, well, unfortunately, man, that's not how capitalism works. But here we are. I appreciate where your head is at, Mr. Nick.
No, that's how it should be. I mean, you look at the Chicago owners, because it's the same dude I think owns like the Bulls and the White Sox. And it's like they've been the cheapest. If that franchise wasn't in Chicago, it would be the worst franchise and Chicago White Sox is already one of the worst, but the Bulls too would be one of the worst if it wasn't in Chicago.
Jerry Reinsdorf does not get enough crap for being probably one of the 4 or 5 worst owners in sports. I understand John Fisher has to be above him right now, but this guy's ruined 2 teams, and if he doesn't luck into number 3 in 1984, you have never heard of him before, and he probably ends up selling the team because he's been so bad at it. And I will never forgive the Last Dance documentary as long as I live, even though I've watched it a lot because it's weirdly fun to watch before bed, by the way. I don't know, this is a phenomenon of mine. I will never forgive the Last Dance for acting like the GM was the main villain and not the guy who owned the team, who could have just been like, this guy's maybe a lot of money. How about we just keep the coach? Just crazy idea. Let's just do what he wants. Why not? Screw it.
That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover, discussing new rules we want to see, the free agent market, and if the Padres and D-backs have any chance of catching up to the evil empire. Javi, where can the listeners find you online?
You could find me on Twitter /X or Blue Sky at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Yeah, that's right. The Blue Sky drop, and at L_Padres on Twitch, but not Twitch, Twitter /X for now, just there. Don't have a Blue Sky account, but go check that out. Go check out Just Baseball, where I've been writing over there for the newsletter. We're going to be covering that a whole bunch over at the website. And that's it for now. And I hope everyone has had a lovely holiday season thus far. The murderous row of holidays, man. October, November, just banger after banger.
Love it, great. Just love it. We love the holiday season. So much to be grateful for. Thank you to the D-backs. Thank you, Locked On. I love you guys. Love my fans. Love the audience. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. Hey, Javi and I will be back. You never know when, because we love doing crossovers. Again, at some point during the offseason. Until next time, Javi. Doses.